out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm I'm sick, and so sorry if you hear like little coughs or sniffles or whatever. Kind of battling that, but we're gonna power through it anyway. I'm Caleb, joined by Perry and Pauline. I think Alan's also gonna come on here in a little bit. So sorry if the format feels a little disorganized. We're just trying to get everyone's take here at the end of the season, last game of the season, as South Carolina fell 45-38 to Notre Dame in the Gator Bowl on Friday, which seems like an eternity ago now, but was just 5 days ago. Before we get too deep into the bowl game, I did want to give you some quick team updates. We're getting kind of daily updates on people that are moving on to the NFL, the portal, people that are coming back, all that sort of thing. Perhaps the two biggest returners thus far since the bowl game, Dakarian Joyner, had this really heartfelt video that he released on social media to his daughter about being like the kind of father that he wants to be and the kind of role model he wants to be and all of that. And basically said at the end, with all that being said, he's coming back for his final year of eligibility at South Carolina, which is a big boost to that wide receiver room, who is missing or will be missing, I believe, 4 of the 7 like top contributors from last year or from this past year. We still don't know on Antoine Wells. We do know Xavier Legette's coming back. We do know Marion Brown's coming back. And now we know Dakarian Joyner's coming back. The other returner is O-lineman Jalen Nichols. He announced yesterday he plans to return. Along the O-line, we know that 2, Javon Gwynn and Eric Douglas, are both declaring for the NFL draft, which seems probably like the right move for those guys. Jalen Brooks, wide receiver Jalen Brooks, is also going to the NFL. That may seem a little premature to some of you out there. We've kind of heard that there's kind of several factors going into that. Not going to like air everyone's stuff or whatever. But anyway, it was the move that made the most sense for him. And then a couple of portal guys, really all kind of reserve people that aren't a huge surprise. Rashad Amos, reserve running back, who really didn't even get a whole lot of play in the bowl game when the running back room was very, very thin. So riding on the wall there a little bit. Hot Rod Fenton, who is a reserve edge, again, didn't get a whole lot of play in a scenario where you would think he kind of would have if he was going to have an opportunity next year. And then long snapper Matthew Bailey, who I don't know. I'm sure the portal is used for long snappers. I mean, that's an important position. So, and then, like I said, we're still waiting on a few more, waiting on decisions from Jordan Birch, Spencer Radler, and Antoine Wells. And we will keep you posted as soon as those guys kind of go public with it. I won't speculate too much on those, but I don't think any of the 3 are 100% at the moment in either direction, at least last I heard. But anyway, let's talk Gator Bowl. So we were kind of talking a little bit before this. Ooh, Alan's here now too. We'll have the 4 box going.
I just got to say, you guys aren't as famous as the 2 people I just got home from talking to. You guys are not quite Don Saley and Aaliyah Boston, but it's good to be here. It's good to talk a little bit of Gamecocks. How you guys doing?
We're doing great. We actually just started, so you haven't missed anything. Anyway, so we were kind of talking a little bit before the broadcast that you never want to take a loss, obviously, but if you're ranking the 5 losses now that happened in the 2022 season, it certainly feels like the Gator Bowl was the best of them. South Carolina, kind of came out the gates hot, got a 2-score lead, held a 2-score lead through most of the first half, maybe took it into halftime, if I'm remembering correctly. There are a lot of points in this one, so I do get a little confused. But anyway, and then it seemed like, we talked before the game that Notre Dame was a little bit of a mirror image of South Carolina, and like South Carolina has done in a lot of these games, they just kind of kept hanging around, and eventually that hanging around paid off, and they started to kind of make up that ground, and then it seemed like South Carolina, especially on defense, ran out of gas. I wouldn't say especially on defense, really on both sides, and maybe the offensive struggles contributed to the defensive struggles in a lot of ways, but either way, couldn't quite keep up, and then even so had an opportunity to tie it within the final minute or final 2 minutes, but ultimately came up a little short there. Let's just I'll go to each of you. Perry, you want to give me your reaction, general thoughts to the game?
Yeah, I mean, I may be in the minority on this, but I actually thought we were the better team overall, but we didn't close it out. I mean, we scored in all three phases. Scored on defense twice. But I thought it was on Spencer Rattler to get the offense going, and we saw, every version of him in one game. Defensively, I believe I got to go back and watch it, but I believe Tonka Hemingway took the majority of snaps at Gilbert Edmonds' position. He was backed up by Johnson. Birch played the majority of snaps at the other edge. And I know the announcers kind of ripped on Stone Blant a little bit in that one swing pass for a touchdown. But from where I was sitting, it looked like the secondary wasn't communicating with Marcellus Style, and he got caught up, didn't hold up the edge there. And it seemed like there were several plays where the secondary wasn't on the same page. And I think a lot of that's contributed to the inexperience there. So there's clearly a lot of talent back there, but I think that the inexperience really hurt us. And the other side of it, the mobile quarterbacks have just been our beast of burden all year. And the funny thing is, thinking back to when Ellis Johnson was defense coordinator and running a similar 4-2-5 defense, we played, I think it's Iowa with Brad Banks down in Shreveport, and we were up on them, and then he just ran wild on us. And it just seems that whatever reason, this 4-2-5 defense has a hard time containing those mobile quarterbacks. And unfortunately, we couldn't pull it out. And Notre Dame finally wisened up and relied on that big running game of theirs and just wore us down there at the end.
Yeah, you spoke about Spencer Rattler kind of showing all of his sides. I think Notre Dame fans probably felt that about Tyler Buchner too. I was listening to one of the national podcasts, and they were talking about how there were 11 touchdowns in this game, but with the two teams combined, and Tyler Buchner contributed to 7 of them, including 2
to the other team.
So yeah, I mean, definitely the quarterbacks on both sides were making big plays, but also making kind of crucial mistakes in kind of crucial times. And I mean, that's going to happen in a game that was this back and forth and really came down to the wire like that. So for this, I mean, you're going to get kind of everyone's perspective from a different perspective. Perry was watching at home, and he's got a coaching background. Pauline was down on the field. She's a senior, so and close to some of the players. And then Alan, of course, was in the press box and has all of that sort of analysis. So Pauline, what was it like being in Jacksonville, your final game as a student, down on the field, photographing the players, the experience of the whole weekend and the game itself?
Well, the first thing I did after I went through the pictures and then posted was thank the whole team, because it was an immaculate last season to have. I wouldn't have asked for a better season to go out on. It was my first bowl game, so I really had no idea what to expect going into it, but it definitely surpassed my expectations, just in regards to the commitment of the fans, and then just how excited everybody was going into it. Even at the end, I stayed for our
alma mater.
Yeah, and it was definitely bittersweet. I shed a tear, but I saw everybody else on the team, senior wise, was kind of in the same boat. Even I just across the board for seniors, I was watching the TCU game, and the Ohio State game, and like the Ohio State like seniors were like crying on the bench, and I was like, I feel the same way. And there was players on the bench crying too. And I mean, that was really the saddest part of it. But on a very more positive note, like being on the field, I was able to capture like a lot of moments that like I honestly will remember forever. Some of my favorite pictures, like Shane Beamer literally jumping into Hunter Rogers' arms, and
He's got good hops. Shane.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, I got that. I got a video of like Hunter and Mitch and Kai like all like celebrating in the end zone, and I like was so happy. I was feeding off their energy. I was like trying to contain myself because I wasn't really allowed to like make a scene, so I was cheering on the sidelines. But definitely moments like those outweigh the loss, and I think we left it all on the field. And
Yeah, so
went out with our heads held high.
Definitely. Yeah, that so those of you that don't know, I mean, we're all like, this is a professional journalism site, right? But several of us, Alan's not, but several of us are South Carolina fans in some capacity, and then we, take our step back and try to be objective journalists and all that sort of stuff. But one of the rules for being credentialed is press box down the field, whatever. Yeah, no cheering. And it's funny because I grew up going to games at Williams-Brice Stadium, and that the whole point is to cheer and get rowdy and all that sort of stuff. So definitely when I was there for Tennessee and that explosion, there are several moments where I had to like catch myself because I like wanted to, and then I was like, oh no.
I know you got to bite your tongue sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely know the experience that you're talking about there. As far as the senior experience in bowl games, that is one reason that I do hope bowl games continue in some capacity as the playoffs continue and stuff, because I do think that's something that's unique about the college experience, right? You got some of these guys that are playing their last game of football ever. They're going to go on and do, whatever with their careers.
They're not going to play in the NFL. Yeah.
Right. And then some of them are going to go play in the NFL, or they're juniors playing their last college game or whatever, but it's still like the end of an era in a lot of ways.
I'm not going to the NFL, but it was the end of an era for me too. So
I don't know. You get a combine invite at least.
Maybe I'll be like 6th round.
There you go. But with this game specifically, I thought some of the players playing their last games as a Gamecock, or potentially their last games as a Gamecock, some of them we don't know yet, really did have some of their better games. Sherrod Green is someone that we talked about before.
A sack, yep.
Yeah, he was telling me about his almost MVP moment, and I was like, that made me. I empathized with him. I was like, I wish I could help you out there, but like, I wish we won too.
Alan and I actually.
Yeah,
he was great.
I think 11 total tackles.
Oh, he was all over the field. Yeah,
I mean, he was everywhere.
Absolutely,
he did everything.
doing the most.
Yeah, he led the team in tackles. And Alan and I were talking last week that next year, even though the linebacker room is going to be young, it might be better off overall, especially if you get Mokaba back and Stone Blanton develops and Pup Howard comes in, all that sort of thing. Maybe you get someone out of the transfer portal too, which we'll talk more about later in the week. But anyway, I think it's important to kind of give a nod to Sherrod Green, who has dealt with injuries throughout his entire career here, that he really had a solid 2022 campaign. It wasn't flashy or anything. He wasn't going to win a national award for linebacker or anything like that, but he was really a very solid force and a big-time leader. And yeah, he went out on a high note, I thought. Played one of his better games as a Gamecock last. Another one that stood out on the defense, who we don't know yet. Yeah, Jordan Burch.
Yeah, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, exactly. We don't know yet what his decision is going to be. Maybe he'll come back again. Maybe he's going to go to the NFL. We should know that in the coming days.
The deadline for that is January 16th, by the way.
Right. But he had an exceptional bowl game. It didn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. I think he had like 1 sack or something and a couple hurries, but he was pretty much single-handedly responsible for both of the pick sixes, if I'm not mistaken, and several other key stops, especially early in the game, where he just put pressure directly in Buckner's face, and Buckner had to rush a throw, and it resulted in disaster. Or, I mean, not for South Carolina, but disaster for Notre Dame.
Yeah, he had Buckner rattled a couple of times. He laid a couple of really nice hits on Buckner, and which led to some errant throws when pressure wasn't even there.
He was in his head for sure. Because
Yeah.
the first 2 interceptions, Caleb said, the first 2 picks was Buckner threw 3, but the first 2, both of those, that's Jordan Birch right in his face, forcing a tip. I don't remember who tipped the balls because the one went to DQ and the second one went to Nick Barrett. But Jordan Birch was in his face on both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But before we get too far into the minutia, I do want to hear your take, Alan, as far as just like overall feel of the game. What I guess in the week itself, I mean, we talked a little heading into it, but yeah, what's your wrap up of the Gator Bowl?
Kind of overall take, and this is what I ended up writing for those of you who haven't read it yet. And I think Perry brings up a really good point about you saw all sides of Spencer Rattler in this game. I think you saw all sides of South Carolina football in this game. You saw really good special teams. You saw a defense that was grinding and grinding and grinding. You saw a defense that ultimately could not stop a quarterback run to save their lives. We saw that all season. We saw some interesting play calling at different points. We saw the offense explode a couple times. We saw the offense sputter for 4 straight 3-and-outs. That was South Carolina football in a nutshell, that entire game. And I think the overall way you put that is, of course, you want to win your bowl game. You want to end with 9 wins. What you saw on the field and kind of and this is what I wrote basically, is that was a 2022 South Carolina football game, but a 2022 game is a good thing in the long term based on what you saw this whole season, the way the team, obviously fought, you saw hands on hips by the middle of the third quarter. Those defenders, they were completely cooked physically before the third quarter was even over. They hung in there as long as they could. And you saw the young secondary. You saw DQ Smith and O'Donnell Fortune with pick sixes. That's the future, guys. Cam Smith's gone. Darius Rush is gone. That's going to be 2 of the guys next year. So that was kind of my general thought. This was just, they kind of played to the way they've played all year, both good and bad. But I think that's a net positive playing the way they've played all year for the overall health of the program was kind of my take.
Yeah, something that we talked a lot about in the off season and really in the early going was, what is the identity of this team? And I think we found out. And I think it's starting to take shape when you put the 2 seasons of the Shane Beamer era together, what he wants the team to look like. And I think we also see, as the recruiting machine continues to get better and better, as potentially, you have a new play caller that you hope is more consistent than the previous one, then on offense at least, then you start to see like, okay, this could work, I think. You're coming off 3 straight games against top 20 opponents, in which you won 2 of them and had a lot of chances to win this third one. And like I said, you never want to really have like a moral victory or whatever, but if you put it all in context, it's not a terrible loss. And if you put it in the context of just like program growth, it does, and this is kind of what I wrote about in the rapid reaction right after the game. It does feel like this is a bump along the way versus
Shaney's an exact quote, bump.
Yeah.
I guess my main, before we kind of go to the drill down on the game, does any of the 3 of you or anybody watching, do you feel worse about South Carolina football in the future after that game? Because I don't think you do.
No, not at all. And
yeah, that's kind of my point.
Look at the recruiting classes that are coming in. I mean, every year.
I like to think of it of a next chapter.
Yeah.
We're on to the next bigger and better things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. Everything feels pretty good. There's obviously some pretty big question marks, especially as we find out the stats of the big 3, I guess, at this point with Spencer Rattler, Antoine Wells, and Jordan Birch. But some of those kind of have reasonable answers already in the queue for them, I guess, or at least answers you can start to wrap your head around. You know, if Rattler leaves, maybe you start to look towards what a season looks like under Luke Doty, which I don't know if that's the worst thing necessarily either. I mean, surely you'd rather have Rattler back right now, but the wide receiver room, I mean, they're going to have to go get some transfer wide receivers, whether Wells comes back or not, I think. And then the edge was always going to be a little bit sketchy. And obviously you don't want to depend on a true freshman, but I mean, it's encouraging to see Desmond Umeozulu yesterday in the Under Armour All-America game. I think he had a sack and a forced fumble. I mean, he played pretty well, and you don't ever play a whole game in the Under Armour game anyway. So that's in pretty limited action. You got some help coming in. So.
Well, we have guys already on the roster that'll take a big jump next year too. I mean, Johnson showed a little bit of what he could do in the bowl game, but he's been injured his whole time here. I thought he might take that next step forward this year. It didn't happen. Next year could be his year. Brian Thomas clearly has some pass rush ability. So there's some guys already here. And then, you know, offensively, there's a lot we couldn't do in the bowl game due to the tight end situation. And then once Nate Adkins went down, our offense started sputtering. I know he came back in, but he didn't seem to be quite the same. We couldn't run the 2 tight end sets nearly the same we did. We tried to do the counter a couple times, and with, I think, Wyatt Campbell in at tight end as well, and it didn't go anywhere. So I think just certain positions, just with an off season ahead, we may come out stronger even, you know, before counting the freshmen coming in.
Yeah, the tight end room is going to look very different next year, but I think very good next year. And we talked a little bit about that last week too, but with all the transfers and freshmen and stuff. And speaking of tight end specifically, right, we talk about the offensive struggles in the second half of the Gator Bowl. There was an opportunity late in that game for Spencer Rattler to hit Jordan Birch, which is, you know, not who you ideally want
to play tight end.
right. For a 25-yard touchdown pass that, like, if Jordan Birch is classically trained as a tight end and has, you know, put in hours of experience in body positioning and stuff, it would have been a tough catch, but it's probably catchable. But
did you notice what else was on that play? Did you notice that play? They had 13 personnel on the field. You had Jordan Birch, Tonka Hemingway, and TJ Sanders all playing tight end on the field on the same play.
That could have gone really badly. All 3 of those guys could have gotten hurt, and that would have been pretty much into that game right there. You know, I'm glad it didn't.
Right. But yeah, you speak about the lack of depth tight end room, and it's pretty obvious that this offense functions best when the tight ends are healthy and doing well. And they were kind of playing with one arm tied behind their back, and they still were creative enough to make it a very interesting game. I wrote after, it was a highly entertaining game. I definitely wrote it when I was doing my pre-write or whatever. I was writing it like, oh, South Carolina gets a narrow win, because that's just what I was optimistically hoping or whatever. But even with the loss, it was just a highly entertaining game from start to finish. Alan, I know, like, we were texting a little bit between it, and you just kept saying like how absurd it was and maybe one of the weirdest games you've witnessed in person. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I think well, first of all, before we get to that, and Pauline might have something on this, that felt like it mattered. And I know, we were talking about big picture, projection, you're fine long term. There's that stadium was full for a non-New Year's Six bowl game. I actually read that other than the 2 playoff semifinals, the national title game, and the Rose Bowl, that was the highest attended bowl game. Like that, Carolina fans filled that place. That felt like a bigger game than it probably was, even though I think we all agreed it still was a big game. Before I get to the other question, Pauline, did that feel like a bigger game it really be on the field?
I mean, it was like, I don't know how to describe it. I thought personally it was split pretty evenly between
Didn't look it from where
Fighting
I was.
Irish and Gamecock.
I will say though, the press box was on the South Carolina side, like the sideline, so it was only Garnet under where we were. But okay.
From the Notre Dame side, it was a lot louder by the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter. So it definitely, maybe at least to me, seemed a little bit louder. But I really wanted to talk about Jordan Birch and Nate Atkins and how the lack of like depth now. They're like basically doing like wearing multiple hats, and just I wanted to get back to that point because like afterwards, when Nate went down, that was when I thought the plays started to get more creative, which is like what I know that we were just about to talk about. But I think it was also the most interesting game I witnessed on the field personally.
It was just
to Alan's point.
It was just screwy. Like that's kind of the best way I'd put it. There's a lot of
like
things,
you're going through the dictionary of plays.
That's a good way. Yeah,
going to like letter Z.
It was screwy. Like I've never seen a long snapper throw a touchdown pass to, or a punter throw a touchdown pass to a long snapper. I'll start there. Perry, you're laughing too. Do you have any of your high school playbooks? Have any of those?
I've never seen anything like that.
Never.
I mean, that means you have somebody else snapping the ball. You're taking the chance, like taking your best snapper out of that position so he can go catch the ball. I mean,
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I saw you mentioned on Twitter that the press box kind of like reacted with how absurd it was too. Like there was like laughter and like
not cheering, but like it was like we're all kind of looking at each other like, did the punter just throw the ball to the long snapper? Like we're trying to get a replay. Apparently Mitch Jeter was the other receiver on that play, which I didn't even notice till I watched it back. So like the ball could have gone to him too in theory.
He comes running up and like pounces on Rogers, which I thought was really funny too. They were having their whole celebrity moment.
Not even a minute later, you get a pick six from DQ. You get Notre Dame, I think it was a touchdown that cut it to 24-17 was their longest touchdown of the season. The little pass I think that might have been the one where the broadcasts were getting on Stone. Perry.
They had two one-play drives that for
and then I think the weirdest thing of all, well, it sounds mean, that Xavier Legette caught that ball in the end zone after all the ones he's dropped this year. That was the one he pulled in for like a highlight reel catch.
Yeah.
That's probably the catch of the season by any Carolina player. Maybe Wells the one against Tennessee, but that was really impressive body control from Legette in the end zone.
Yeah, he has that ability. He
does. And he's, people might not like it, or they might not want him to be WR1 next year. I think they're going to portal someone eventually, but Legette's going to be a big part of this puzzle next year. He just is. He's going to have to be. And then the screwiest part of it all to me was, and you already mentioned this, Perry, but Notre Dame up 7, running through a completely cooked South Carolina defense, and then they throw a pass on the goal line and OD picks it off and takes it. But that was the like outer space point. Like that's kind of where you crossed into the twilight zone, because there was just no reason for that ball to go in the air. And the only thing go ahead.
What was he doing there anyway?
He
wasn't covering anybody. He was just kind of, it was like he was lost on the play too. And
he accidentally got a 100-yard pick six.
Yeah. I was like, well, okay, but
yeah, it was just
no one was where they were supposed to be. It was kind of
a stack. Yeah, it was a stack of weird things, one on top of another. That's kind of the way I would put it. It wasn't, you've had the Tennessee game in general was weird. I think the way the Clemson game ended was weird with the muff punt. There's been
that's how I thought this game was going to end, though.
I did kind of think that, and I guess there were bits and pieces of other games. The A&M game first quarter was weird with the 17 quick points. Like there were bits and pieces of weird all year. It's South Carolina. That's kind of the way it works here. But I don't think you've had 60 minutes of weird like that, wire to wire, other than the bowl game.
Yeah, I messaged in the group chat like in the fourth quarter. I can't remember even what the exact moment was now, but I was like, wait. I was like, this is the first time that I felt like South Carolina might lose this game. And there's just like a weird feeling, maybe because of the 2 games prior or whatever, where like no matter how strange it was getting, that's kind of like thrives in the chaos, I guess, so that it was just going to work out. And then, eventually it just didn't. But even I think after I texted that, then the O'Donnell Fortune interception happened. And I was like, okay, I guess we are just going to continue to be weird.
That was like my last like saving grace of hope was when that happened. I was like on the same wave, because there is like this like it's like a switch that goes off where all of a sudden, I mean, at least for me, just like with the fans as well, all of a sudden you kind of realize it's quiet and like no one's really like cheering. You hear the other team a lot more, and the players just like the energy's not there. The defense was kaput after the third quarter, so I mean, understandable. But yeah, after that, after O'Donnell, I thought it was over after that. That was the last saving grace.
I don't know how you guys. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're going to say.
I just said the problem there is defense was so gassed and that
get right back on the field. Yeah, exactly.
A great play, but yeah, they got like a 20-second break and then they were right back out there.
That's why Jordan Birch was Zach Pickens wasn't there.
I was literally about to say, I think the biggest, I know they lost Smith, they lost Rush, they lost the tight ends. Like, I think if you could have had one player back in this game that you didn't, that could have won the game, I think it's probably Zach Pickens. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
No one talks about it too. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I 100% think that he was a very valuable player that no one really talked about.
He just moves so many bodies in the middle, especially against running. He does. Like, it sounds funny, but like he just, Perry can speak to it more from a coaching perspective, but he just takes up space and moves bodies. And when you're facing a kind of a power running game like what Notre Dame has, I think that probably, and obviously that means you keep Tonka fresher, you keep Alex Huntley fresher. Like, I think that's kind of what I thought. But
Alex was also doing a lot on the field as well. So
I honestly felt that way about any of the positions, to be quite honest. I mean, one of the cornerbacks, I think a lot of the miscommunication in secondary gets cleaned up. Like Pickens certainly would have helped on the defensive line. Even another tight end that had been playing all year would have helped offensively. I think you could really pick any of the positions.
Yeah. We haven't even mentioned him yet, but Keenan Nelson Jr. didn't play a snap in the regular season. He played like 60-something in this game, I think it was.
Yeah,
he didn't play a defense snap. He was on special teams, but got his first career start.
He struggled.
Yeah, he did. And that's not his fault, but like, yeah.
Very, very talented, but he struggled. And
you saw DJ Twitty getting snaps at H-back. I don't know if any of you guys noticed that, but he was in there blocking a couple times. Yeah.
But to be fair, from the Notre Dame perspective, right, if Drew Pine starts that game, does he throw 3 interceptions, or do they play it a little bit more conservatively and win that game?
Oh, it's not an excuse. I do think
or whatever, you know, like.
I mean, look, you can look at the total yards, you can look at the numbers. Like Notre Dame probably. I think if you play that game 10 times, Notre Dame probably wins 6 or 7 of them. Like, I don't think that was an unjustified risk. I mean, Perry, you maybe disagree. I don't know, but
the only reason why I kind of shrug on that is because we scored in all 3 phases, right?
Yeah, so that's fair.
To me, it feels like we were the better coached team overall.
That's what a lot of people were saying on the takeaway was just we played better.
But I mean, the thing is, I thought Notre Dame was not relying on their strength in the first half. I mean, they weren't running ball much, and I felt like if they had really just downhill, they could have gashed us much earlier.
Yeah.
So I mean, I thought we were better overall, but the best team doesn't always win. We saw that throughout bowl matchups this year, you know. So I mean, it's just the way it goes. So, but with that, I gotta jump off. You guys have a great day. And, catch you next
Bye,
time.
Perry.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for your perspective. All right. Any other like major storylines from this game specifically that you wanted to hit on?
I think we pretty much covered the bowl game. I do think there's some big picture stuff we got to get into. Kind of look, like I said, we're still 12 days away from the NFL draft. Oh, you got something?
Hot take is that I don't think Juju McDowell should be number 0. That is my.
It did look kind of weird. You're looking at that like.
I know.
It looks so. Obviously, his body type is totally different than Debo Williams, and those are your 2 zeros. And it's like it just looks
then
off.
They ended up on the field together, and I was like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, that's actually another point too. They had some uncharacteristic special teams mistakes, which I think is just the like so many guys. Because special teams is always the fringes of your rosters, guys that haven't played together a lot. So. I mean, that kind of is what they had 2 delay games going into punts, and also obviously a couple. That's what I wanted to ask you about, especially Pauline, because you're on the field. I could just see it from 30,000 feet. Shane blowing up at the end of the first half, getting a penalty. What did you see on that one?
So, like, all of a sudden, on the sidelines, I was actually next to Kendall Smith from Gamecock Central, and all of a sudden, like, I see on the big screen and look over to the sidelines, and Shane is stomping his feet, like, and I was like, I didn't even know what the call was because in the beginning of the game they were all buddy together. I thought, And I mean, there were some questionable calls, and that's one of the things that fans were like upset about. I mean, I'm not a referee, so I'm
I
not
thought
gonna
that call
like,
was the illegal blindside block on the punt return. About a minute left in the first half. I thought that call was
yes.
bad, maybe, but I didn't think it was like so egregious that that's the one you blow up on and get a penalty. And I mean, Shane admitted himself to the responsibility that kind of killed that drive. Like Shane cost him 15 yards there, and they had a chance to score before halftime.
Oh, absolutely. Like that 15 yards was definitely within like how much time was left? Like
a minute and a half, I think.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like that was necessary for us.
Yeah,
but
Shane.
Also, I think
Shane
back
did kind
to all
of
these
screw
other
the pooch
games,
there.
really like Shane he has had his moments on the field before, and I was telling Caleb, I've never heard that call ever. Like I never.
It's a pretty rare
seen,
one, yeah.
Yeah, and I like.
And it got called twice.
Years of college.
Yeah, it did get called twice. Although the second one I thought was pretty obvious in the press box, at least.
Yeah. But
did you guys see? By the way, did you see this? Did you notice Luke Doty on the field and kick return blocking on that last kickoff?
He was like randomly on the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so the penalties, I definitely thought, like, I try not to be the like blame the refs guy ever. And there's a bunch of reasons, like on the field football reasons, that South Carolina lost this game. But the refs didn't help. It definitely did feel like it skewed. Some of the like weird questionable calls skewed against South Carolina down the stretch in some kind of key spots. Shane Beamer, like that's the most
hurt the rest of the game.
I obviously only saw it through the broadcast or whatever, but that's the most angry I think I've ever seen him, which was entertaining and interesting.
Afterwards, the whole penalty thing, I would have stormed off the field too, to be completely honest with you.
It was just a weird, my opinion, it was a weird spot to blow up. After all 12 games, I guess 12 and a half games at that point, penalties up and down, closer games, fourth quarters, like that was the one that got you. And I didn't think it was a great call. I mean, but I've seen way worse calls than that this year, both for and against South Carolina. Like I didn't think that one was so ridiculous that was the one to get a penalty over, but what are you going to do?
Yeah. That penalty in and of itself, just from a football perspective, kind of frustrates me. And as someone who played football, right, like to me, and this is actually a comment from my dad, like while we were watching the game, but to me, you shouldn't have live kickoffs anymore if that's going to be a penalty.
No, I'm with you.
Because like that's kind of the point is as someone that's playing on the kickoff team, trying to go down and tackle the guy or whatever, you have to, part of being on the kickoff team is, yes, you're going after the guy full force, but you also have to have your head on a swivel for where a blocker might be coming from. And if you don't see him, that's part of kickoff. So, if you want to take that completely out of the game, fine, but then just like, let's stop pretending that
I'm anti-kickoffs in general. It's the most dangerous play in football just by concussion ratio. And this is a topic for another show in the offseason, but I'm kind of in general kind of with you that we probably don't need to have kickoffs anymore. But that's a separate issue.
Yeah. All right, let's talk some big picture really quick. I texted you guys before to kind of think about a couple things. So let's start with, what were some of your biggest surprises of the 2022 season? Obviously, like the highlights are going to be like, oh, we beat Tennessee. But any, like, I guess more obscure or more specific surprises from the past season that you didn't expect as we were heading in?
Go ahead, Pauline. I got you.
Well, the first one I was going to say was, I know we mentioned him earlier, but in the beginning of the season, we were a little slower on our wins, but Luke Doty always kind of was our little secret weapon in those instances when Spencer was kind of under pressure and he got taken out like once or twice and Luke was able to have a chance in there. I think I want to see him more, and I didn't get to see him more. Like, I didn't get to see him develop throughout the season, which I would have wanted to, especially in this scenario where there's questionability that Spencer's not coming back. So I wish I was able to see him play more. That is one of my takeaways.
Yeah, there really weren't too many games where South Carolina was far enough ahead or far enough behind to give him too many opportunities. I mean, he played against Georgia, And then I do know that
touchdown against Charlotte.
Yeah, and I do know we learned later in the season that there were some active talks about preserving his red shirt, so that he does have more years of eligibility to play once.
I mean, Beamer said it point blank. The reason he didn't play against Florida was they didn't want to go over the redshirt threshold.
Right. But yeah, so that's kind of a mystery, I guess, going forward.
Well, especially because our QB record when it comes to finding them and our players in general in the past, we've kind of hit the mark on that. So that's why I'm interested to see, because I do see a lot of potential.
This sounds crazy considering none of us ever seen him play a college snap. I'm kind of Tanner Bailey bullish. I know he was a big time recruit. He flipped from Oregon. Like, we've been hearing stuff that he worked up the depth chart. He was traveling to road games. Like, none of us ever seen him play a college football snap. It's kind of a ridiculous thing for me to even say, but like, sneaky bullish on Tanner Bailey, just kind of the things we're hearing.
There's no doubt he's going to be near the top of my list of spring storylines should Spencer Rattler move on. As far as like, is he going to compete for that starting job by spring, or at the very least solidify that number 2 as a redshirt freshman, which would still be impressive.
No, but mine, you talking about surprises. Oh, were you done?
No, sorry, I just missed that point. Would you repeat that? Sorry.
About Tanner Bailey?
No, with you on that. What did Caleb? What did you just say? I was trying to like formulate a little.
He's like a storyline for the spring.
Yeah, so if Rattler leaves,
do you really think?
Quarterback?
Do you really think that there's? Oh, remember. Do you really think though that he would be securing a second spot, or he would be the first? I
think Tanner Bailey. Like, if Spencer Rattler's gone, there's every chance in the world Tanner Bailey is your backup quarterback on opening day next year. I don't think that's unrealistic to say.
He's going to be first?
Yeah, I do. At this exact moment on January 4th, we're 8 months from the next game. But yeah, I do think Luke Doty's a starter next year if Rattler goes.
We had heard some back channel conversations with some transfer options should Rattler leave, but some of that's quieted down, at least at the moment. But yeah, that's obviously still also an option. But if the room looks as it looks right now, I would say Doty obviously is the leader in the clubhouse or whatever. Surprises from 2022, Alan?
Nicky Murray and DQ Smith. I mean, 2 guys, neither of them were recruited that highly. Nicky Murray wasn't recruited by anybody but South Carolina. DQ Smith came in as a quarterback. They flipped him over to defense. And that's probably the 2 best players in secondary by the end of the year, other than Cam and Darius, who are both NFL players. We did hear all of August. I will kind of half retract that Nicky Murray was impressing people. They liked him as a player. And then, of course, literally the first drive of the season, RJ Roderick gets hurt. And Murray has to come in. Just that secondary is kind of what I would say the surprise was. Was there, if I told you before the year that 2 true freshmen would have to start basically every game all year in the secondary, you would not have put 8 and 4 on the board. There's no way. So I think that's kind of my biggest surprise, just in terms of names that were off the board in August who are now very, very on the board for 2023.
I totally agree. I just think that the class coming in and the recruiting is going to end up like, it blew my mind in the beginning of the season when I was going to these press conferences, and then they started to become more and more prominent within the game. And I was watching them on the field develop, and I'm just like hearing about all these other like star recruits that we're getting. And Shane is doing an incredible job at going and finding these players that like you would never assume would be starting first game of the year. And here you go. And now at the end of the season, he's like one of our most useful players, I guess.
Yeah, you have to be pretty excited about the secondary because you have tons of youthful talent now that has lots of college level experience. And then, like you just mentioned, there's a pretty impressive recruiting class of 5 DBs coming in that also could push for playing time pretty immediately. So it's young, but a very, very talented and deep secondary very quickly, whereas that was a weakness just 2 seasons ago. I mean, even heading into this season, it felt, strong but thin. As far as surprises go for me, Antoine Wells, I would say exceeded expectations. Like we all expected him to start once we were hearing what we were hearing once he arrived, pretty much. But I don't know that I expected him to be one of the best receivers in the SEC and make himself into a potential NFL draft caliber prospect. Just 2 seasons removed from being recruited as a FCS level receiver out of high school. So that's a very impressive trajectory for him. And then the only other one that came to mind is just how vitally important Nate Atkins was. Because
him
they
and
first,
Austin.
Yeah, well, when they first signed him out of the portal, I was like, all right, well, they already have Gene Bell and Austin Stogner. I can't really see what sort of role Nate Atkins is going to carve for himself. But honestly, you could say he was the most important of the 3 throughout the season. I mean, obviously, Bell played a major impact while Marshawn Lloyd was out and all of that in some other ways. But as far as the tight end position, Nate Atkins was just like this consistent force and showed some sneaky athleticism in some major
Clemson
games. Yeah. So that's it for me. All right, really quickly. I know it's January 4th or whatever day it is. We have a long stretch before next September. Maybe you haven't even looked too deeply at the schedule. I've looked a little bit at it.
I have.
I would say it's easier than it was this past season.
I don't know if I agree with that.
That's my opinion. I mean, okay, it's easier looking at it in the preseason than this schedule looked in the preseason. And then I think once you get into the meat of a schedule, some of the teams you thought were going to be difficult aren't. Some of the teams you didn't expect to be difficult are. It kind of shakes things up. Anyway,
my only thing. Go ahead.
No, just what are your expectations for this team in 2023, and what are some of the questions that you need to see answered over the offseason to sort of fill in some of those gaps? Whichever wants to go first.
I'd be excited to see North Carolina, obviously, because it'll be 2 years later. We can see if we're still better, the better Carolina. Well, yeah, but September 2nd, that's the first game that we're playing. So
right, you're saying it's been 2 years since the bowl game?
Oh, yeah, sorry. 2 years, very loosely 2 years, but by next season, it'll be cool to come back and see if we can still hold our own against them, if their program has gotten any better.
Same stadium too, the game's in Charlotte.
We shall see. Can we rattle them again? That will be fun to see.
Yeah, I guess my only schedule point, and not to cut you off, is that's a tough September. Like that, Georgia on the road, Tennessee on the road. You got a sneaky 9-win Mississippi State team coming to Willie B, and you got neutral site North Carolina before you're even out of the first month. Which, and I know you guys have questions too, and I do. When you're talking about questions that have to be answered, you got to answer them quick because that's a front-loaded schedule next year.
I was about to say, I don't really think that there's any stretch like there was this past season where we had an opportunity to come off of 2 consecutive wins or something like that. I'm looking at this now and I'm literally thinking maybe Jacksonville State and Vanderbilt, but even Vanderbilt was a little too close for comfort this past season. And I hope that isn't a repeat, but that's honestly the only 2 I could see that would be kind of our little winning streak, I guess.
I mean, I don't think that the September is tougher than it was this past September. You had to go on the road to Arkansas. I mean, you had Georgia at home, but that was never going to be a very easy game anyway. I guess maybe you had one more gimme, but
you had the one more gimme, and you're replacing week 1 from Georgia State in your place to North Carolina with Drake May coming back at a neutral site, which is kind of what I think tips it. And they definitely can win that game. But I think that kind of takes me to the questions. For me, this whole offseason, we're not going to know until the lead up to the season. It begins and ends with Dowell Loggins, right? You get this new offensive coordinator, a guy who's never called a play in college football. Obviously, it can work. I think we clearly know how Shane feels about it possibly working. But it's kind of you got to wait and see approach, and you got to prove it to see it. you got to see Dowell Loggins call plays. You got to see the offense look good. Anything you're doing in 2023, it's going to have to start with that getting it off the ground, right?
I think it's kind of going to be like a similar scenario to just like reaction wise from the fans and from like South Carolina Gamecocks in general. Loggins is going to be kind of the same as like when Spencer Rattler came in, where there was kind of this hesitation, like, do we really think that this kid's like worth it on the team type? There was a little bit of negative energy and negative like buzz around it. But then Spencer proved us all wrong and said, I deserve to be here. Like, I think that'll be ultimately like what happens with Loggins coming in, but the Gamecock fans are going to have to allow him to like welcome him with open arms, I guess, and allow him to show us, I guess.
And then I got a comment here saying from Carl saying Vanderbilt might be putting something together. Yeah, that's kind of a sneaky tough game in November. Vanderbilt obviously won 5 games last year. They beat 2 SEC teams that went to bowl games. I think kind of my other thing too, maybe you have a thought on this, Caleb, you've kind of done some recruiting stuff. Just maybe this is where Big Tree comes in. No one's talked about it, but South Carolina is losing 3 starting offensive linemen, all that play next to each other. You got Eric Douglas at center, Javon Gwynn at right guard, who's probably going to be an NFL guard. He'll at least get drafted. And then Dylan Wanham at right tackle. You could have the addition by subtraction argument. You say that the guys coming in might be better. I think there's at least a case. I think they're going to have to portal at least one more offensive lineman. I don't know if that's even negotiable at this point, just from a depth perspective. But yeah, you're losing 3 out of 5 there.
Yeah, I mean, you already got one in the portal, right, with Nick
Giorgilio,
Giorgilio. Nichols just announced that he's coming back.
That's a big one.
You got Jakai Moore coming back. You got Tyshawn Wanamaker coming back. Kason Henry is a freshman that's made.
I've seen him. Yeah.
He played a couple snaps in the bowl game, I think. Yeah.
He's been doing pretty well for himself quietly in the corner.
Yeah, he had some nice buzz coming in, and then I've heard some good things throughout the season, but obviously he just needed to develop. So hopefully a full year in the weight program, a full year in the nutrition program, he's able to sort of contribute some snaps.
Do you have way too early? Who do you think those 5 are going to be against North Carolina? Because if I had to guess right now, I'd say Nichols at left tackle, Moore at left guard, Kick Vershawn Lead at center, maybe. And then maybe, I don't know, Kason Henry and Giorgilio on the right side, but they're both tackles, so you need a guard in there somewhere. Like,
you still got one or two.
I feel like that's such a jump. That's such a jump.
You're going to need someone to play. You kind of got an overabundance of tackles. You need someone to kick inside to play guard, I think, is going to be because Jakai Moore's a tackle by trade, too. He was a left tackle coming into the program. So, I don't know.
I mean, but she's known to switching players around.
I'm interested in that story. You mentioned questions. I've got Dowell Loggins and the offensive line are kind of my 2 biggest questions as we sit 9 months from the next football game.
Yeah, which honestly, check out GamecockScoop.com in the coming days. I'm going to have a little bit of a recruiting wrap up and a portal wrap up coming up. They did just offer several linemen in the portal. I can't think of them off the top of my head, which is why I'm telling you to go check it out in a couple of days when my brain is functioning better. I've been sick all week. I think I said that at the beginning of the show. So this is
your
definitely
flu game, your Michael Jordan flu game.
Exactly. No playing Dinero says, "Go Gamecocks. Good afternoon."
Appreciate that.
Yeah, always loving comments from anyone that's watching, by the way. So appreciate you checking in.
Did we want to hit on like a couple minutes of basketball, or are we just gonna get out of here? Because there's a men game last night.
Let me give you my 2023 expectations and questions. And
of course.
I think my expectations probably do start somewhere around 8-4 or whatever, if I'm going to put an actual number on it. I mean, I'm looking at the schedule and it is front loaded for sure. But you think if you, at worst split North Carolina and Mississippi State, and win against Furman, you're 2-2 heading into Tennessee. Really, it's going to be tough all the way until Florida. But then you got a stretch of Missouri, A&M, Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky before Clemson. So I do think you have space to really piece together some wins. And then if you get some big wins on the front half of the schedule to get some momentum, it becomes interesting down the stretch. I don't know. There are a lot of questions like that we keep bringing up. My biggest question still right now is Spencer Rattler the quarterback? If you have that to build around on offense, both in your endeavors in the portal that are still ongoing, and just building around what you already have on the roster and building around Dowell Loggins and what he wants to do on offense, then I think you have to be pretty optimistic. Obviously, Rattler was up and down, but we also saw the sort of upside he does have when things are going well. Pauline, did you have something on that?
Yes. So I think that personally, my future, like my prediction is 7-5. I don't think we're going to do as well as we did this year. But also, I don't, unless we can secure Spencer Rattler for this upcoming season, I think that we're going to lose part of the whole identity we've been trying to build over this past season. And that's because we haven't really had a like for sure quarterback since this past season. In my personal opinion, we thought Ryan Helinski was gonna be our for sure quarterback. Didn't end up working. And honestly, after 4 years, I could say that Spencer really is the only permanent but satisfactory quarterback that we have had. And if we don't secure him again, the whole program is going to fall apart, but the identity that we've been working on is going to kind of falter and crumble a little bit, and we're going to have to find a whole new start from the bottom, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that to some degree, although I think that the personality of the team has built itself around Shane Beamer to the point that he's kind of earned a little bit of trust to the of wherever it's going next. Even with the bowl game, I think is a good example of this, right? Where you do have these pretty key subtractions or people moving on or whatever. And then South Carolina came out the gate firing. Like, it seemed like the team very much still believed, I don't care that we're missing all these people. Like, we have it. Ultimately, they ran out of gas, but it seemed like the attitude was still, it doesn't matter who's here, we're going to compete,
And I'm always a big proponent of that, the whole attitude of just making sure the team is locked in and not getting rattled and stuff like that. But I definitely thought that there were key moments where I definitely realized that those players that have moved on were not there when we could have used them there. They were missing.
Yeah, once the game settled in, for sure, it became apparent. All right, yeah, let's talk a little bit of basketball before we get out of here. 2 games have already taken place this week, and then 2 more games, one each for men and women, are coming up this weekend. Are both of those at home? Remind me.
Yeah, it's actually a third women's game on Sunday, but yeah, for the rest of this
away.
week, Sunday away. They're women at home tomorrow against Auburn. That was the pregame presser today that I was a few minutes late before coming into here, and then Tennessee Saturday for the men, which that might be tough. That could be a bad one.
Yeah, Tennessee just blew the doors off of Mississippi State last night.
16 to nothing out of the gate, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was rough. But yeah, speaking of the men's team really quick, and then you guys can speak about the women's team, because I wasn't paying attention as much to that game the other day.
You were physically dying on Monday.
Yeah, I was in a black void of nothingness. But I did watch the men's game last night. I came away, it was a loss in overtime. I came away impressed at the way that they played on the road. Early in the season, it felt like anytime they were out of Colonial Life Arena, they were completely a fish out of water. And then it seemed like on that DC road, which started with a blowout loss to George Washington, but then they get their first road win against Georgetown, something kind of shifted. They started road losses since then, I believe, ECU and now Vanderbilt. But they've played much better. The margin of victory has been much more respectable. And it seems like they're starting to build a little bit of an identity. And that identity starts with Gigi Jackson, and then whoever they can get hot from behind the arc, which last night Chico Carter scored 26 points.
Got real hot. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a great game. Unfortunately, they just couldn't get it done down the stretch. And then in overtime, it took them 3 minutes and 46 seconds or something like that of the 5-minute period to score their first field goal. And by that point, they were down 7, I believe, and they just couldn't claw. There wasn't enough time to claw back in. Vanderbilt made their free throw shots down the stretch and kind of closed it out. But if you watch that whole game, you saw encouraging things from Gigi Jackson, Chico Carter, Michi Johnson. Another key factor was right at the beginning of overtime, Hayden Brown and Benjamin Bozeman.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Both fouled out in the first 30 seconds of overtime. And that's something that we've talked about. Like, you're super thin. I think South Carolina scored 10 points off the bench.
It was 63-10 Vanderbilt off the bench last night.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're going up against these teams that have greater depth than you can't get into foul trouble.
No, and that's been we've had this conversation with Perry. That's been the Hayden Brown problem pretty much all year. That being my point, my other kind of positive, or maybe more of what I want to see, play these freshmen. Obviously, Gigi, okay, he's kind of in his own bracket, but Zachary Davis, I think there's some pop there. He's got some good handles. He can shoot a little bit. And Daniel Hankins-Sanford ended up on the court in overtime because the other bigs fouled out, but that's kind of the future of your program right now. And again, technically you have 3 freshmen. I think we kind of know the deals with Gigi Jackson, but Hankins-Sanford and Zachary Davis, I would like to see get more minutes, especially when Lamont's kind of going with these small ball lineups. He's kind of liking the Michi Johnson, Chico Carter Jr., Jacoby Wright look lately as a backcourt. Slide Zachary Davis in there now and then, just kind of see how that fits. I think for the long term, when you're kind of look towards next season, year after that, I get these freshmen more minutes was kind of my other take from watching last night.
I would just say that to both of y'all's point, and really in the beginning of the season, even in the summer before school started, we were hearing about what the basketball program's going to look like. Basically, what the basketball program was going to look like was Gigi Jackson. That was the only player, namesake-wise, we would ever hear. And I would say now that we've gotten a couple games under our belt, there are a couple more names that we're starting to see, like Brown. And I mean, I've only been to one so far, but I've been impressed with a lot of other players that I would not have assumed really would have been hyped up. I believe they should be more, but they're starting to, I think, as the season goes on. Hopefully those freshmen will start to be able to, their names will start coming up more and more too, especially if we already know what's going to happen with Gigi Jackson.
Yeah, and I think we do. I also, before we get out of here on the men's, switch to women's briefly, I got to mention the dunk Gigi Jackson had last night. That was pretty good.
Invalidating my point. No.
It was pretty good. You got to find a video of that.
I linked it in my article. If you want to,
it was pretty impressive. It was a putback for those of you who haven't seen it. It was I can't remember who missed the shot, but someone in South Carolina missed an outside shot. Vanderbilt didn't crash the glass at all. Gigi just comes in and throws it down on the rebound.
And he caught it way above the glass. It was really cool. One other, what did you say?
6'10". How tall is he?
6'9", I think he's listed at.
Yeah, and he jumped to a solid. Man, I don't know. He was probably 12 feet or something.
It was pretty impressive.
With his arm. And anyway,
me too.
Michi Johnson, I'll say, seems like he is healthy again.
Yes,
he's looking very explosive. Good things happen when he attacks the rim. Sometimes he still takes these it's hard to say that they're crazy outside shots because he knocks down a lot of them too.
No. That's actually, I was texting with someone else last night about this. You can call him crazy. He's pulling up from the logo at least 3 or 4 times a night at this point.
But he usually makes at least one.
He does, but I don't know if that's the offense Lamont. I don't think Lamont Paris, he doesn't have hair to pull out, but I don't think he would have been happy with what he saw in that last. I know I'll give, we talked about it a little bit. We were texting that last possession last night. Michi Johnson makes probably a bad decision and then gets another chance and makes a really good decision on that pocket pass underneath. It was Hayden Brown who tied the game, right?
Yeah, so the last possession of regulation, which actually we didn't really talk about that just now, but if you missed the game, South Carolina was down 2 with the last possession. And yeah, Michi Johnson fired up a three, bad three. There was it careened off the glass.
Chico got it first.
Chico Carter also tried a
blocked.
three, got it blocked. It went back to Michi Johnson with like 1.5 or 2
Not enough
seconds
time
left
to
or
shoot.
something. Yeah. And instead of just like heaving it up because he didn't have a good angle or anything like that, he saw that Hayden Brown had kind of snuck down near the basket and he passed it to him real quick. Hayden Brown made it with 0.3 seconds left to tie it up and send it into overtime. So yeah, like we were texting about it last night. Just to have the awareness of the clock to know that he has time to make that pass instead of just trying to heave up something terrible at that moment or whatever. Especially when usually his mindset is a shooter's mindset. For better or worse, sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, he scored 18 points last night or something. Like he was a crucial part of South Carolina being in that game. But certainly sometimes you're like, man, that's a wild shot. If we go to the women really quick, the only thing that I gathered from the void while I was laid up in bed that day was that they were down for the first time
in a while.
Yeah. And they were at Georgia, correct?
Yes, I was there in Athens. And then Zia Cook exploded. I mean, I didn't realize this. You would think with how successful this program's been, all these years, national titles, they hadn't had a player score 30 points in an SEC game since 2009. And then Zia Cook goes out and scores 31 against Georgia. I think kind of your general, we're coming up on the halfway. Actually, tomorrow we're going to cross over halfway on the women's regular season. Teams are going to paint pack. Aaliyah Boston's too good. Camila Cardoso's too good. Victoria Saxton's too good. The general way teams are going to play South Carolina, maybe until you get to the tournament at least, and teams can kind of play you straight up. They're going to paint pack. I don't know if you guys saw the photo of it. It's on my Twitter, but of Aaliyah Boston with 4 defenders around her like this in the paint. We talked to her about that today a little bit. I got some quotes on my Twitter. Alan_Cole, if y'all don't follow me. You got to shoot. You got to hit outside shots. That's kind of what I think is going to – this team's obviously incredibly talented, incredibly deep. They're going to make a tournament run, but your cut between winning another national title and falling a little bit short is going to be outside shooting for this team. Just because teams pack the paint so much, they zone you. And, yeah, 2009, it was I think it was Brianna Dickerson, I think what it was against Ole Miss. I have the number in my article. But, yeah, teams are going to paint pack. You got to shoot. And that comes back to Zia Cook. She's an outside shooter. Bree Beal hit 2 threes in that game. We talked to her post-game. Kiera Fletcher, I've written about her already a couple times this year, but she's kind of got a good mid-range jumper. You got to hit the mid-range jumper. You got to hit some threes. That's kind of what I think. That's where I think it is for this team between now and tournament time when you're trying to like think about a run, is trying to set those shots up better.
Yeah. So on GamecocksGroup.com, as we transition into basketball season, we're in the heart of the SEC schedule for both the men and women now. We'll have plenty of preview coverage for each of those games, live coverage for each of those games, and review coverage for each of those games. One more thing I'll say about the men's team is they were picked 14th in the SEC preseason at SEC Media Days. I'm going to go on a limb. We're very early in the SEC schedule and all. I think they're going to finish better than that. I don't know if it's going to be much better than that, but I don't think they're going to finish dead last.
Thanks for the support.
No, I think that they've shown that they continue to play hard under Lamont Paris. They certainly have deficiencies, especially with their depth, that a lot of these other SEC schools do not. They are probably going to get absolutely walloped at times, perhaps the first time this weekend against Tennessee. But I think against the mid to lower half of the SEC that they can compete and that they're going to win their share of those games. It should still be an interesting season. Plus, you're going to get a highlight or two of Gigi Jackson every single week. So still worth coming out and seeing a future NBA star. Also, we'll have plenty of football off-season content. We still have announcements incoming for the next couple of weeks, 12 days approximately, about the NFL draft decisions and all that sort of thing. We have transfer portal additions and subtractions and all that fun stuff. We have recruiting news. There's still until early February, so about a month left for the 2023 class. We're starting to transition to the 2024 class. There's still 2 2024 welcome homes out there that are yet to be announced. That should be announced soon. One certainly in the next 2 weeks. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening. Go check out GamecockScoop.com, and we'll be back here sometime in the next week to continue to talk about it all. Until next time, this has been Pauline, Alan, and Caleb with the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We'll see you.